Well, I'm going to talk now with Professor Manuel Marcondes Machado Neto, known as Marcondes, as you were telling me. He's a specialist in communication, social media, a writer, journalist, PR professional, advertiser, basically everything you can imagine. In this course, we're discussing various topics related to social media, image building, crisis management. All of these subjects are being covered. The first question I'd like to discuss with you is what should be the profile of the person who will manage a crisis or who will lead a department that might have to handle a crisis within a company?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. First, it's essential to conduct a thorough diagnosis. We actually published a piece about this recently on the Observatorio portal. There are a lot of people who come in with their own ideas, who join a company with their own preconceived notions, and they don't do the diagnosis. It's essential that a diagnosis is carried out. So, knowledge of the business, knowledge of the company. In this day and age, I have become thoroughly convinced that the professional work of public relations or similar advisory roles is actually much more fundamentally focused on the important principles of good governance rather than solely on generating publicity. Historically, people thought of communication professionals, advertisers, PR specialists, even journalists when they moved into advisory roles as being about publicity. To appear in the news, you don't have to advertise, which is what we call earned media. You don't need to pay for it. You pay a professional, and they will try to find an opportunity for you. To do that, you have to really learn the business well, and then you can start to get involved in management. That's a very high level. When you earn enough trust, music, to take part in decision making. So it's essential that this happens today.
And today, university courses don't prepare someone to work in this field. The professional has to go after it themselves.
No, unfortunately, our academic regulations from the NEC actually go a bit against the grain. Today, what is expected from professionals is versatility, which used to be valued. 40 years ago, it was even a training requirement. Today, the training programs are very separated. They're more divided than ever before. Today, there are separate bachelor's degrees in journalism and public relations, each autonomous and independent. But the market wants a professional who can handle everything. So, unfortunately, our training is still geared toward producing employees. We train journalists to work in newsrooms with classes in photojournalism, television journalism, radio journalism, and we train advertisers to work in agencies. And today, the main employers are entrepreneurs, companies, and startups. And when the communications professional gets there, the employer says, listen, I want you to take care of my social media, reach out to the press, and create an ad for the employees. What is he going to say? If I don't do it, if I have a different kind of training, I'll lose my job.
Today, a company's reputation, an image that has been built over decades, can be destroyed now by a single social media post.
Yes.
How do you analyze this phenomenon?
Well, this is a bit encompassed by what is now called digital management or digital marketing. We don't really know. It's a discipline that's still taking shape. If someone says they know where this revolution is going to end, they're just speculating.
A different professional should manage social networks, not the same person who handles the company's image.
Yeah, the problem here is that for cost reasons, the employer wants one person to take care of everything. It's hard to find this all-in-one professional, right? A specialist in everything. Yeah, social media is really, really, really new as a phenomenon. Advertising agencies are scrambling to adapt the old budgets that used to be set by traditional media, and all of that has been completely changed, revolutionized. And when you talk about the idea of reputation, remember that reputation is something you consciously build over time. In a similar fashion, the digital environment also works to build a public image, okay? But the public image crises that you used to at least try to contain, when you had a really well-connected press officer, they'd go and try to control the damage. Today, on social media, everyone is a broadcaster. You delete the post, but someone has already taken a screenshot. I mean, nowadays a crisis happens in seconds. It's no longer even a matter of hours, like it used to be on radio and television when you could still try to mitigate it. Today, we're going to find out about, say, a dam breaking before the press does, because someone
was already there with their phone.
You're the reporter. There's an interesting book I recall called iMedia, and it highlights how everything has changed so completely in the modern age. But it's very important to remember this fundamental shift doesn't in any way take away from the incredible value of the true specialist. I mean, I actually think that on the contrary, maybe today we can tell someone, look, stop relying on that talented nephew of yours or that cool friend who does it for free and is good at making videos. You need to professionalize, you need to have a specialist, because otherwise it just doesn't work.
Now, on the other hand, you've already mentioned something along these lines, but how can companies take advantage of social media?
Oh yeah, well, in this day and age, it seems like everything is basically Google. You reach companies, you reach businesses, you reach people through Google. Therefore, they absolutely need to establish a competent presence on the internet and on social media.
You can't hide, can you?
No, it's not possible. Today, it's impossible. We're in an era of extremely high exposure. People even want to, they even like it, or sometimes even need to, depending on their profession, they need to be visible. But the media is very limited now. There has been a reduction in available space, and at the same time, a huge increase in the number of people wanting to promote themselves. So this competition has become more difficult. Of course, with the internet, you yourself can take action. You go to Nestlé's portal, and they have a whole battalion of people taking care of the Instagram for each product, the fan page for each product, the LinkedIn showcase for each sector, for each subsidiary. So, I mean, it has expanded tremendously, and this gigantic universe has also become harder to manage. It's like the Chinese plate spinner, right? Where is the problem going to happen? The biggest public image crises nowadays have been quite ordinary. The Extra case, the Carrefour case, these were serious issues, but they blew up because of leaks, because of homemade videos. No one can control that. You just can't.
Now, some people and even some companies try to avoid social media. They don't have a Facebook profile. They don't have an Instagram account. They try not to share photos. Is this also a healthy path for the future that's coming? And even we, who are now rethinking the concept of social networks and their importance.
Look, I'm going to make a very important theory here about fast food. Perhaps in the complex world of business to business, that is to say, companies that primarily supply other companies with essential goods and services, they might be able to afford to keep a relatively low profile or even remain somewhat invisible to the general public. However, they absolutely won't be able to do without a functional and accessible digital portal or a comprehensive, well-designed website, because in this modern era, that is simply not a viable possibility anymore. The yellow pages no longer exist. If you're looking for a company, even if it's just to supply steel for you to manufacture your product, you're going to search on Google. So it has to be findable, discoverable, findability. But maybe the fact that it's a supplier to other companies allows it to keep a low profile. Now, if you sell to the public, if you're business to consumer, then that's a contradiction. You open a business, sell popsicles, open a shoe store, make very sophisticated shoes, make very healthy ice cream, and you don't show up. How does that work? It doesn't make sense.
Recently in Brazil, in fact, we're still experiencing Operation Car Wash, which dragged the reputation of some very important companies in the national and international markets way down. We have the most classic example of Odebrecht, which changed its name to try to improve its image, to even try to escape the image created as a result of corruption allegations. Do you think that this name change by Odebrecht works or will work, and how long will it take for the company to no longer be remembered for all these scandals it was involved in? And other construction companies as well, but let's use the specific case of Odebrecht.
This week, there was a post on the portal about this topic, about this specific case. Personally, I think it's very difficult for there to be a recovery because there's something called rebranding and something called renaming, which is what's being adopted by companies with problems. But in the case of Odebrecht Construtora, it kept the name, it has the acronym OEC, and the O stands for Odebrecht. So I recently saw that there is a possibility of maybe an attempt at judicial recovery. I mean, there has been a drop in contracts. That is, the company might succumb to its problems. In this case, it's not a media problem, it's not a brand problem, it's not a name problem. It's a problem of practices, of bad practices. So for the group companies that completely change their names, it's possible. But the main one that kept an acronym plus the name, I think that's very difficult. And that's inevitable. The crisis was so extremely severe that even a brand that's over 100 years old faces the real risk of disappearing.
Now, on the other hand, Petrobras managed in a way when the shares dropped. I think they went down to around 4 rays and something. But today, the shares are more or less where they were 4 years ago. The company is recovering. Is that because it's a public company or because the name is stronger than any crisis?
I don't believe that the name, let's say, can overcome any crisis. Why? Because you have the public on the other side. The public includes all the stakeholders. It's not just you and me, but also the government, the professional press. I think Petrobras's case is hard to analyze because it's a monopoly. And it's a company with all the symbolism since 1954. The oil is ours, Getulio Vargas. I mean, it's what we have for today. It's what we have for the century. It's Petrobras. So it's synonymous with Brazil. What are Petrobras's colors? They're green and yellow. It has already gone through many crises, even an attempt to change its name to Petrobras that already happened. And it's still here. People still want to work there. They want to take exams to get into Petrobras. It deals with what is perhaps the most important commodity on the planet, which is oil, and it also works with gas, and is moving into energy in general, already working with wind and solar. Today I saw an ad while coming to Curitiba on a plane from Equinor, which is the new name of the Norwegian company. Anyway, state-owned companies, it's more difficult. Take Alitalia, for example. It's really struggling, but it's still Alitalia. It's the flag carrier.
It's the new name of the country.
Well, we used to have a flag carrier, which was Varig, and now it's TAM. Actually, it's not even TAM anymore. It's LATAM. So this niche of names and brands can handle some things, but not everything.
To wrap up, I'd like you to give a message to those who are going to work in crisis management, to talk about the importance of professionals who understand the mechanisms to both prevent and handle crises, whether in companies or even in personal situations.
Look, the most important thing I could say is that we really need to go back and examine the very origins of the field of public relations. We should consider when it first arrived in the country, back in the year 1953, and when it was formally introduced to the Brazilian School of Public Administration at the prestigious Getulio Vargas Foundation. In other words, dealing with image, dealing with reputation, dealing with crises, these are not minor or peripheral issues. They are central matters of governance. So, ultimately, we will be less focused on communication and more focused on management. We need to get closer, without any prejudice, to the numbers people, the controllers, the economists, the administrators, those who run the business. And let's leave the waiting room. As I like to say, let's stop just handling press releases and crises. We need to be part of the decision-making because the communications professional on the board of directors can prevent a decision, naturally, before it actually materializes. Look, this factory in this neighborhood is going to create a crisis with the surrounding community. Should we move to another neighborhood? A communications person thinking about this, but that's what they're paid to do, to think about public opinion. They're not a lawyer who's thinking about contracts, nor a financier who's thinking about the numbers. They're thinking about the press, the repercussions, the invasion of that community. So they have every ability to anticipate because they were trained for this. They're a social scientist. I often notice this, that we in academia are applied social scientists. And that was done to put us in the background compared to anthropologists, sociologists, and political scientists. But I tell my students, look, we are social scientists, period. You have to debate with sociologists, lawyers, economists as equals. And show that from a decision-making perspective, it's important to have a communication component. And that's where the specialist is needed. That's the final message I want to leave.
Thank you, Professor, for your words.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.